Number 14 in our Mastering the Minis course is the LeMoyne Star. The LeMoyne Star has two contrasting colors that are coming out like this. In this sample, you can't see the distinctive colors. So I've changed my colors to be a little bit more contrasting. You're going to need 3.5-inch squares of 3 different fabrics. We need 2 of each. And the way we're going to put these together is, oh, and you need a whole bunch here of, because these are going to make 2 squares. I've got 8 1 and 3/8 inch squares here. Okay, so in order to make our triangles, we're going to use 3 different colors that are contrasting. I'm going to take a cream on top of my purple and a cream on top of my green. And then I'm going to take the green on top of the purple. And for each one of these, I'm going to draw out my cut lines. I'm going to draw my cut lines. So I'm going to start diagonally on my cream colored piece. That way I can see it. I'm using a heat erasable pen, but you could use a pencil since these are cut lines. And then I'm also going to draw my center line because once I start cutting, sometimes I lose my center line. That way, at least this way, I know every cut line I need. My only sew lines are going to be on the diagonal. So I'm going to sew a 1/4 inch down the diagonal here, 1/4 inch of the diagonal here, 1/4 inch and a 1/4 inch. I like to use a very scant 1/4 inch for this so that I have plenty to trim off in the end. If I'm off a little bit, I don't worry about it. Now we're going to cut on all the cut lines. This is when I'm glad that I drew all of those in, because despite the fact that I have this wonderful ruler and this wonderful cutting table, things are going to shift out of place. And so if something shifts, I just move it out of the way. And I have my cutting line so I can come back to it. If I'm a little off, it's all going to get trimmed out in the end. That's the hard thing about half square triangles, is that it's really essential that you trim everything and square everything off before you put your final project together. Now we're going to press all of these open and get them ready for trimming. I always press toward the dark one. To do that, I place my dark up on top and then open up. I find squaring to be the most tedious part of the process, but it makes everything else go so much easier. So I've left a few here to show you how to square. This one is pretty wonky. I can tell right away that I'm going to have some issues. So the wonderful thing about the Creative Grids ruler is that they have the 45-degree angle and the 45-degree angle. When I've used a square, I couldn't figure out why I was getting perfect squares but not perfect triangles. And it was because I was leaving out the most important step, and that is the actual diagonal. And so as long as I keep this diagonal line on my line for my triangles, I'm going to get those perfect triangles. And you can see that I'm still it's just a wonky triangle. Luckily I have, because I use that scant 1/4 of an inch, I have plenty of room to play with here. So I'm keeping my diagonal line here on the triangle right here, and then I am lining up with this vertical line here. Sometimes that's not possible because we're using a different measurement, like a 16th, but that's okay. We're using eighths, and so it seems to be lining up great for me today. So I'm lining up here, and then I am also lining up with my 3/8 over here on this side, and I'm lining up with my 3/8 here. So you see that now I'm not on a line, I'm on my eighth line. The other thing you want to watch for is that you still have tips of your triangle here, and so that's really, really important. And one of those key things I was missing when I first started squaring triangles. Once you get all these triangles squared, everything goes together really easily. The LeMoyne Star normally goes together using Y seams and diamonds. I would much rather, especially with these small pieces, work with triangles than I would like to try to do Y seams. So that's why I chose to do the LeMoyne Star using the half square triangles. Sometimes they just come out perfect without having to do much of anything at all. So now we're going to put them together. It always helps to have a diagram or a actual block so that you can see where your pieces are going. So now we're going to put our star together. I start by putting my corners on the edges, and then the star is always going to point out. And so I'm going to have one color of one, and then the other side. And so you can see how the star is pointing out, and you've got your cream color in the center. For the center part, I'm using all the pieces that are the purple and green without the cream. And so this is where your star starts to take shape. You want to make sure your colors are lining up into that diamond formation. It's pretty easy to see where the star's coming out if you have a good color contrast within the star. So now I'm putting this together just like I would a 4-patch. So I'm going to go over like that and stitch this row, then I'm going to go over like that and stitch this row. I like to fold everything over in its when I'm doing this so that I can make sure everything's going to stay in its place, and I'm going to stitch always on my right hand side. And then I'll pull them out and do it all over again. All right, I'm going to put all of my star together now using the 4-patch method, but I have moved over my seam allowance a little bit to give me a larger, more consistent 1/4 inch seam versus the scant 1/4 inch seam. If you are worried about whether or not this 1/4 inch seam is right, then do one row, measure it, and make sure that your 1/4 inch is right. We want each row to measure 4 inches in the end. I am careful to take them off in the order that they came in so that I can lay them back out in the same order. And then I also make sure that they're going in the right direction by laying them back out in that right order. Chain piecing can certainly get you a little bit out of sorts, and so I go ahead and lay everything out again, and sure enough I had mixed a couple up and put them upside down, and so now I know everything's back in order. I am going to do the same thing I did before. I'm going to put everything from my right side over my left side, and I will stitch down the right side of my pieces. Now that I have finished my rows, I'm double checking to make sure that I'm within the 4 inches and everything's looking pretty good. And now I am going to turn them over, and what I want to do is make sure that I am going one direction with my seams and the other direction so that they'll nest in pretty. And so I am going to follow, this one seems to want to go this way. So this one gets to lead. And so we're going to go to the left with this one. And then I always turn it back over to make sure that I'm going the right direction. So this guy gets to go this direction. All right, so now I'm going to start with my top row. And I'm going to put that one over this one and this one over this one. And again, I'm going to stitch down that right hand side. This time I want to make sure that I am nesting these seams in together because there are a lot of seams in this little block. All right, so I'm nesting. I nest as I go along. You're certainly welcome to pin, but these little blocks are so tiny that I'm not having any problems nesting as I go. It's also nice that because I've trimmed everything, it all goes in very quickly and easily. All right, one last check to make sure everything's in working order, and then we're gonna do the last seam. Last thing to do is to press and square it up. So we created the LeMoyne Star so that we had diamonds going out from our star. This same setup with all those squares that we cut could be done in a totally different way. And simply placing our half square triangles in a different way, we could have a pinwheel in the center instead of the star in the center. If I can get them going in the right direction. There we go. Okay, so you can see how we can have a pinwheel in the center versus doing the LeMoyne Star. And so this just gives you a little variation. And since I'm doing 4 of these for the corners of my quilt, I am going to go ahead and do 2 of them. I'm going to do one this way and one of the other way with this color combination. And then I have another color combination I'm going to use. So the final step to the Mastering the Mini LeMoyne Star or alternative is to square it up to the 4 inches. So I have my diagonal line that I'm going to go right through the center, and I have the 2-inch mark here, so that tells me where I'm going with my 2 inches. For the alternative, my diagonal line is going straight through my pinwheel. My rulers slip in just a little bit because of there are quite a few seams in this one. And that finishes up number 14 in our Mastering the Minis course.